You hear the words Silk Road, and what pops into your head? Probably a single, lonely trail, with some camels carrying silk from China to Rome, right? Well, what if I told you that entire picture? It's not just a little off, it's almost completely wrong. Okay, let's dive into the fascinating, complex, and often violent reality behind one of the most important networks in all of human history.
So let's start with the most basic question, because it really does challenge everything we think we know. What was the Silk Road really? We've got to throw that image of a single road right out the window.
The reality was so much bigger, so much messier, and honestly, so much more interesting. It wasn't one road. Think of it more like a planet's circulatory system, a huge, sprawling, ever-changing web of routes over land and sea. And yeah, silk was a big deal, but this network carried the actual building blocks of civilization itself. We're talking religion, technology, even entire armies. You could almost call it the original World Wide Web, just woven together over thousands of years.
So let's dig into that first big idea, its role as this massive engine for exchange. And again, this was about so much more than just trade. This was the superhighway for human progress.
Of course, the goods themselves were absolutely incredible, and it was way more than just silk. Just try to picture it. Spices from the East Indies that were literally worth their weight in gold, dazzling Roman glass, beautiful Persian rugs, gold, silver, even live animals. All of this was constantly moving back and forth across continents, creating unbelievable wealth in these amazing oasis cities like Samarkand.
But maybe even more profound was the stuff you couldn't pack in a saddlebag. Ideas, beliefs. Entire religions were basically hitching a ride with the merchants. Buddhism made this incredible journey from India all the way across the Himalayas and into China, changing and adapting the whole way. Christianity found a foothold deep in the East, and eventually, Islam would become one of the most powerful cultural forces all across Central Asia.
And then there was the tech, game-changing technology. Take papermaking. This one Chinese invention moves west and completely revolutionizes how information gets stored and shared across the entire world. And it wasn't just paper. We're talking new ways to farm, new kinds of metalworking, new knowledge about medicine and the stars. All of this knowledge was spreading like wildfire along these routes, sparking change everywhere it went. And if you want to see what all this mixing actually looks like, this quote about the Dunhuang caves just nails it. You can literally walk into these caves today and see the fusion right there on the walls. It's Indian religious ideas being painted with Chinese artistic techniques, creating something totally new, totally unique. It's the perfect symbol for the creative power of the Silk Road.
But now, we have to flip the coin, because that beautiful story of harmony and exchange, that's only half of it. The very same routes that carried art and ideas also became bloody battlegrounds. And here's the bottom line. Whenever you have trade routes that are generating that much money and that much strategic power, conflict is basically guaranteed. Controlling these arteries of commerce meant everything. And, well, everybody wanted a piece of that action.
And this conflict happened on every single level. You had the constant grinding fear of bandits. You could be a merchant your whole life and lose everything in a single raid. Then you had vicious little wars fought over a single oasis in the desert because controlling the water meant you controlled the trade. Zoom out and you have huge empires like China's Han Dynasty locked in a centuries-long war with nomadic peoples for control. And then, you had the world-ending invasions that could just wipe whole civilizations off the map.
But this is where the story gets really weird, where we find the great paradox of the Silk Road. It turns out that all that conflict didn't just stop the exchange. Sometimes, and this is the crazy part, sometimes the violence is what actually forged a deeper connection.
Let's just take the most extreme example you can think of. The Mongols. Okay, we have to be clear here. Their invasions in the 13th century were apocalyptic. We're talking cities burned to the ground, entire populations slaughtered. It was an era of absolute, unimaginable terror across Eurasia.
And yet, what came after that wave of destruction is one of history's biggest ironies. It's a period historians call the Pax Mongolica, the Mongol Peace, a peace born from unbelievable violence. After they conquered just about everyone, the Mongols created this one massive, unified empire. And by doing that, they made the trade routes they once terrorized safer than they had ever been before.
You see the paradox, right? First, absolute devastation. Then, a golden age of trade and communication. This is the world where a guy like Marco Polo could make that insane journey from Italy all the way to China and back in relative safety. Why? Because the Mongols had brutally conquered everyone in his way. The sword, in a very real sense, cleared the path for the merchant.
So, this table really sums up the whole story. The Silk Road was always these two things at once. For every stunning piece of art that blended cultures, there was a brutal war over territory. For every world-changing technology that spread, there was the constant threat of violence. It was always a story of both beautiful creation and violent destruction, happening at the exact same time.
So, what's the big takeaway here? Why should we care about this ancient network today? Because its legacy isn't just about dusty history books. It tells us something really fundamental about how our own world works. The Silk Road teaches us that who we are, our identities, is never fixed. It's always being changed and reshaped by the people we meet and the ideas we share. It shows that blending cultures, as messy as it can be, is where real creativity comes from. And maybe the most important lesson of all, being connected to each other causes friction. It causes conflict. But despite all of that, it is the #1 engine of human progress.
And that leaves us with one last thought for right here and right now. Today we live on our own digital Silk Roads, the internet. It connects us instantly all over the globe. It's a source of incredible exchange, but it's also a source of conflict, misinformation, and massive power struggles. So the question for us is, how do we learn from this ancient history to better navigate that same timeless dance between connection and conflict in our own world?